Hello, this video lesson is going to be about how to evaluate sources. So you go out and you find sources on the internet and you have to ask yourself, is this a good source? Is this a reliable source? Is this a source I can trust? And I'm going to show you how to do that today by evaluating a source that I found here on a blog called Raising Race-Conscious Children. So the first thing I want to let you know is that there's a really great resource that I like to use, and it comes from Ohio University's library, and it is called the CRAP test. And it will tell you if your source is good and reliable or if your source is crap. The CRAP test, by the way, is available in Teams right here in our Writing and Research folder. That's where you'll find it. So to take a look real quick, I want to show you guys, let's just kind of look at the CRAP test itself and see what how to use this. So the CRAP test has 4 basic criteria that they look at: currency, reliability, authority, and point of view or purpose. And that's where the CRAP comes from, C-R-A-P. So for each one, you could give the source a score of anything between 0 and 10. And then you add those up to get a total possible score of 40, and that just gives you a really, a good general idea. Basically, if the score is like 30 or above, you've probably got a really reliable source. If the score is anything like less than 20, I would find another source. That's probably not a good source to use. So just to go over each one first, the currency. So the question of currency is, when was this source published? Is it a very recent source, like this year, the last couple of years? If so, you would probably give it a high score. Is it a really old source, maybe from the 1940s, 1950s, or even earlier? If so, you'd probably give it a low score, because anything that's recent describes our current world and our current understanding of the world. Anything that's very old is probably going to not describe our current world and our current understanding of things. And below, you'll see there are some good criteria questions. How recent is the information? So that's pretty clear. You know what year it was published. How recently has the website been updated? But then the third question is important too. How current does it have to be? For some questions, let's say you're writing something about pandemics and infectious diseases. If that's the case, then probably you would want something that was published this week, since the entire world has changed in this week as the coronavirus has come out. But if you have other topics, the sources don't have to be quite so current. If the topic is about someone like Abraham Lincoln, you could read a source that's even 10, 20, 30 years old, and it's possible that it still has relevant and acceptable information. So the second category is reliability. And so the question here is, how much can you probably trust this source? If it's highly reliable, you could stake your life on it. I would bet my life that this information is true. If it's really low, it's not worth a cup of warm spit. There's absolutely no trust whatsoever in this source. And the questions you should ask yourself when considering reliability: what kind of information is included in the resource? Is it mostly just like a bunch of opinions? Is there a lot of like factual data? Are they presenting information that comes from from scientific research? Or is it just kind of like a bunch of random thoughts and opinions? Does the creator tell you where he or she got the data or the quotations? So just like you guys are using APA style to tell your readers where the sources of your information, a highly reliable source will also tell you that. And it could be, if it's an academic source, something like an APA citation, or if it's an online source like a blog, then they should probably be linking to the sources of their information. And the last one is are the facts based on academic research? So as I said a minute ago, are they actually using reliable sources for their own work as well? So so those questions will give you an idea of whether or not something is reliable, whether or not you can trust the information that you're reading. The next one is authority. And in authority, you notice that word author right there. Who wrote it, and does this person actually know something about the topic? So up at 10, it's like another Einstein. If you're reading something about theoretical physics and it was written by Albert Einstein, that's going to get a very high score for authority. If it's somebody who seems like they're brain dead, they don't know anything about it, then that's going to get a really low score for authority. And so some of the questions you should ask yourself when considering how to score the authority is, who is the creator or author? And not just what is their name, but who is this person? What information do you actually know about them? What are his or her credentials? So for credentials, what we mean there is what's their education? Do they have degrees? Do they have advanced degrees like master's, PhD degrees, an MD if it's a medical subject? Where do those degrees come from? What kind of professional experience does this person have? And particularly, are the credentials actually related to what you're reading? So, if you're reading from Albert Einstein and it's about physics, like, of course, he's got incredible credentials. But if you're reading something by Albert Einstein and it's, like a review of a film, like, Albert Einstein's not an expert in art and in film, and so, he doesn't necessarily have high authority in that subject. So make sure that the author or the creator has relevant experience and good credentials for the subject that you're reading about. Is the publisher or sponsor reputable? So look at the company that's created this. Who published the academic journal? Who published the magazine? If it's a news source, what's the publisher of the news? Is it something like New York Times, which is highly respected, or is it another source that's not well known or not well respected? And finally, what is the publisher's interest in, if any, in this information? So with a lot of academic sources, you can just basically you can trust what's coming from. But if particularly sometimes what you'll find is something that looks like academic research, but it comes from a company, especially like medical research that might come from a company that produces medicine, pharmaceutical drugs. So if the company produces medicine and they're researching the medicine that they are also selling, then of course they want to make money and they want to make it look like the medicine is good and the medicine is safe and the medicine is effective. So ask yourself whether or not the company who's publishing this information has any kind of personal interest. And usually that means, are they making money from this? And finally, the last one is point of view or purpose. So the question to ask here is, does the source have a strong opinion about about the topic, or is the source like deeply involved in the topic? If they're completely objective, as Mr. Spock, who basically was an alien that had no emotions. So if they seem to be completely objective, completely neutral, you would give them a very high score. But if they're totally biased, if it's clear that they have an opinion and a purpose, and so they don't want to give you true information, then you would give them a low score here. So some questions to ask yourself about point of view or purpose: is this fact or opinion? So obviously, if they're presenting a lot of facts, then you probably would give them a high score. If most of what they're giving you is opinion with very few facts, then you'd have probably a lower score here. But it's important to note that even a highly, even if it has a lot of facts, almost everything will include some opinion. What is its bias? And so, in other words, what is it that how does this person or this source see the world? And especially if you're reading anything that has to do with politics, as everyone has bias in politics. And so you have to figure out, for example, in American politics, we talk a lot about Republicans and Democrats. If the person who wrote this is clearly a Republican or clearly a Democrat, then they're going to have bias toward that point of view in the things that Republicans want or the things that Democrats want. So you have to be careful if you notice a lot of bias. What is its purpose? This is a really important question. What are they trying to do with this this source? Are they trying to inform you? In other words, are they just trying to give you information so you understand more about the world? Are they trying to persuade you? Are they actually trying to change your mind? Are they trying to make you agree with their opinion or do something? Or finally, are they trying to entertain you? If the goal seems just like it's to make you laugh and have a good time, then that's the purpose of some documents that you'll find. So if the purpose is to inform, that's going to get the highest score here. If the purpose is either to persuade or to entertain, you're going to get a lower score for this for point of view or purpose, because if they're trying to persuade you, then they're either going to change facts to try to change your mind, or they're going to leave out facts that might go against their own opinion. If their goal is to entertain you, then again they might change things. They might change some facts, or they might leave out some facts because that are not entertaining. They're going to present things only to entertain and not necessarily to inform you. Are there advertisements on the website? So that's really important too, because then you realize that oftentimes if there's advertisement on the website, the goal of the publisher, the person that created it, is just to get people to click and go to their website so they can get money from those advertisements. And if that's your goal, then your goal is not necessarily to inform people by presenting true information. So that's something to be careful about. Why did the author write this? So try to figure out their purpose. And it can go back to, are they trying to persuade you? Are they trying to entertain you? Are they trying to inform you? But try to ask yourself why the author wrote this. And then who did he or she write it for? And if you ask these two questions to yourself, that'll help you figure out a lot about whether or not they are neutral and objective, or if they have a point of view or some kind of opinion that's going to be affecting whether or not you can trust their facts. So that's a lot. So there's 4 things to look at: currency, reliability, authority, and point of view or purpose. Using those is how to use the CRAP test. And now what I want to do is I want to give you an example. So I want to go back to this blog post that I'm using for my project. And I want to use the CRAP test to evaluate this and try to give it a score. So the first thing I'm going to look at is currency. When was this published? So I see here it was published January 15th, 2019. All right, whatever, you see it right here. So January 19th, 2015, that's pretty recent. It's 2020 right now, so that was only about 5 years ago. However, so because of that, I'm on the high end. That's pretty recent. However, if I think about the world and I think about my topic, which is racism, in 2016 we had a presidential election, and Donald Trump became president in 2017. And the situation with racism and the way we deal with it in our country has actually changed quite a bit since that time. And so for that reason, I would go maybe even a little bit lower. I still feel like it's pretty high, but it's not super high. So I think I'm going to give this one maybe like a 7 for currency. And I'll go ahead and mark this on here so that I can remember it later. Let me use my little handy dandy shoop. All right, so I'm going to give it a 7 for currency. My next question is reliability. And so again, to remind myself, what kind of information did the creator tell you, where they got their data and quotations? Are the facts based on academic research? And so when I look at this, what I see actually, so one thing that's lacking here is there's not a lot of fact information in here. There is a lot of kind of like theoretical, a lot of it is kind of very first-person experience about, how she reads with her child. But then a lot of it is also based on kind of academic theory that's been developed. And I can see that there's links to things like, a post by the person who created the hashtag Black Lives Matter. And there are also, but that's kind of, other than that, there are some links, but they're mostly links to like other books and other sources that could be used. However, knowing a little bit about this, I see the Library School Journal Review, blah, blah, blah. So, I can see that there is, even though there's not a lot of fact information, there are some links that are taking us to like, reliable and respected sources of information. So I'm, not really high, but for the particular field that I'm in, I'm gonna kind of probably put it fairly high. Um, I'm gonna put it probably up. Well, maybe like I'll make this one a 7 too. Um, okay, so the next one is authority. So remember, the question is, who is the creator or author, and what is his or her credentials? And so I can see right here the author is Sachi Ferris. Um, Okay, so I know her name, but then the question is, who is Sachi Ferris? Um, so this is something that's really common, especially if you're on a blog or website. As you're going through this process, you have to look for that something like about. When I go on here, I see about the blogger. So I'll click on that. Sometimes you can click on the person's name directly. Um, and so now I've got a little bit of a description of who Sachi Ferris is. And I see, based on her personal description, that she's got direct, relevant experience with issues of racism. She herself seems to be multiracial, and she lives in like a multilingual household. But I also see, okay, I'm seeing some degrees, MA in Sociology and Education from Columbia University. That's really good. MPA in Public Policy as well. She's an educator who's been working on this subject since the year 2000. So that's a long time, 15 years when she wrote the blog post. She founded a nonprofit called Border Crossers. So I can see that she's got actually like a lot of relevant, she's got good credentials for what she happens to be writing about. But then the other thing, actually, so this helps. I found this not just through a Google search, but I actually found this blog from another well-respected scholar named Robin DiAngelo. And I read a book by her called White Fragility, and she's a very, very well-respected scholar in the field of anti-racist education. And if you go to her website, you go to resources. So these are things that Robin DiAngelo recommends, and again, she has very high authority and respect. And so whatever she recommends is probably going to be pretty good and pretty trustworthy for this subject. And so when I look down here, okay, for white parents, resources, I see here Raising Race-Conscious Children. And that's actually where I found this blog. I found it from Dr. Robin DiAngelo. And so because of that, I'm actually probably going to give it like a higher score for authority. So I'm going to give it probably like an 8 for authority, particularly because it comes from that recommendation from the well-respected scholar. And so the last one is point of view, purpose. And so it's an interesting question, to talk about the point of view or purpose of something, and objectivity versus subjectivity. And sometimes you have to think about your topic as well. If your topic is a lot more of like a scientific topic in the field of like maybe engineering or technology, you might want a source that is a lot more objective and fact-based. But on the other hand, my topic is about anti-racism. And my blog here is actually a primary source. It's from someone talking about her direct experience. And so the fact is, this person, Sachi Ferris, who wrote this, when I think about why she wrote this, and what her purpose is, she is attempting to persuade us. She's attempting to persuade us that we should engage in anti-racist education with young children. And so for that reason, she's got a clear point of view. She's got a clear purpose here. So for some subjects, I might give it a lower score. Like I said, if it was more of like a science-based subject or something like that. But this topic just happens to be a topic where, you wouldn't really expect objectivity. There's really no such thing as objectivity when you're talking about a subject like racism and educating children against racism. Everyone has a point of view or purpose about that. So I'm not going to score it that low, actually, as low as I would if it was some other subjects. And because, and again, because it's kind of backed up by like some strong authority and some decent reliability, I'm actually going to give it probably, and because, having a clearly stated point of view and a clearly stated purpose is actually a good thing in the field of anti-racism, I'm actually going to give it a higher score, like 8. Because she is very, she's telling us right up front, this is my point of view, this is my purpose, this is what I want to do. She's not trying to hide that purpose. When someone tries to hide their purpose, then they're more likely to actually be lying to you. So I'm going to give this one a high score, even though it's not really objective. So when I look at this, I've got, let's see, now I want to add it up and see what the actual CRAP test score is. So I've got 8 plus 8 is 16. Let's see, plus 7 gets me to 23, plus 7 gets me to 30. So I'm giving this one a 30 out of 40. And so as I said, it's not probably the strongest source in terms of reliability, but I think, considering that what I'm looking at is a blog post that's a primary source and really describes someone's personal experience with the subject, I think 30 out of 40 is actually a pretty high score for the CRAP test. So I'm going to keep this source, and I think I'm going to use it for my research project. So this is how to use the CRAP test to evaluate your sources. So I encourage you every time you find a source to get out the CRAP test and to really go through these 4 criteria and ask yourself these questions to try to determine whether or not the source you found is a source that you can really trust.